Please, God, please.
With the 17th pick in the 2020 NFL Draft, the Dallas Cowboys select T.D. Lamb.
Yes! 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 What's going on, guys? That was a very, very interesting NFL draft, to say the least. And honestly, I was kind of shocked by some of the picks, but I wasn't really as shocked by some of the picks as I was last year. So, as is tradition, most NFL or most content creators that do sports content typically come out with their biggest winners and losers of the NFL draft. Now, guys, really quickly, huge disclaimer, it is absolutely impossible for me to sit here and tell you which pick was the right pick and which pick was the wrong pick. So I am merely going based off of each player's value prior to the draft. Think of it as the stock market. You know, if you drafted a player too early, he could end up being a great player. The Cowboys drafted Travis Frederick in the first round of the 2013 NFL Draft. He had a third-round grade on him, but he ended up being a Pro Bowler. But regardless, that was considered to be very poor value at the time, and the Cowboys got an F for that grade, even if Travis Frederick's career turned out great. So the same thing applies here. Just because I say a pick was a bad pick doesn't necessarily mean that the player is going to be a bad player. Rather, it just means that they could have got better value for that pick. Now, guys, before we get started, I want to let you know that I am giving away $1,000 in total on my The Flight Mike Instagram account. I'm going to leave a link to that in the description down below, and if you want to enter, you could win yourself some money. Let's start with our most obvious winner at the very top of the draft, Otago Viola. This is a guy that was getting absolutely destroyed by NFL media leading up to the draft. Everybody loved punching him and saying that his career was going to be horrible, he wasn't going to make it past his first contract, and the Dolphins were giving up on him in favor for Justin Herbert. But no, the Miami Dolphins stuck to their guns, and they made a pick that I thought that they were going to make at the end of the day, and they took Tua Tagovailoa. So huge congrats to Tua, but that also brings our very first loser of the NFL draft, and that's Josh Rosen. Bro, this guy can't catch a break. I went on a tangent about Josh Rosen before. This guy was a first-round pick, tremendous upside from 2 years ago, and he gets put in this position where he plays for a head coach that wasn't going to be the long-term head coach in Arizona, and Steve Wilks. He was there for a year. Steve Wilks had no idea how to run that Arizona Cardinals offense. Even David Johnson regressed that year too, and Josh Rosen was put in a situation where he didn't even have an offensive line. The Arizona Cardinals end up being so bad that they get the #1 overall pick in last year's NFL draft, and they also changed their regime. They fire Steve Wilks, bring in Cliff Kingsbury, who has a love crush on Kyler Murray, draft Kyler Murray #1 overall, ship Josh Rosen into pretty much the same exact situation, only now he's a Miami Dolphin with no offensive line and not that many weapons. And once again, the Miami Dolphins get into a situation where they draft a quarterback in the first round. So my heart goes out to Josh Rosen, man. I hope someone really capitalizes off of his potential. I hope Bill Belichick tries to trade a 4th-round pick for him. At least someone give this guy a chance. He was a 1st-round pick for a reason. Moving on, my next winner of the NFL draft has to be the Arizona Cardinals. They were projected to initially take an offensive lineman, and I thought that they would have taken an offensive lineman in my mock draft, but things were very strange in the beginning of the NFL draft. For some reason or another, a player that I thought was the #3 best overall player in the entire NFL draft slipped all the way down to the 8th overall pick for the Arizona Cardinals to select. Now, we all know Hassan Reddick hasn't been the greatest player for the Arizona Cardinals, so obviously they're going to take a player like Isaiah Simmons, and that's great value for him. Isaiah Simmons could do multiple things. I think of what Mark Barron was for the Los Angeles Rams, where he was like a hybrid linebacker slash safety, only he's like a super version of that. He could completely change the way the linebacker position is played, but unfortunately that also means that Kyler Murray is going to be a loser in this scenario, because if you guys saw what Kyler Murray was going through last season, the man could barely stand in the pocket, make his reads, and run the air raid offense. I felt really bad for him whenever I would watch him out there, and I was hoping that they would get offensive line help, or if not offensive line help, most of us thought that the Cardinals were going to take his former teammate CeeDee Lamb, and Kyler Murray was still advocating for CeeDee Lamb throughout the draft despite the Cardinals trading for DeAndre Hopkins. But at the end of the day, they're getting defensive help. Great value at the pick, but Kyler Murray is still going to have a fairly difficult time on the offensive side of the ball this year. Which brings me to our next winner, and that is the Denver Broncos. We heard that the Denver Broncos were doing everything they possibly could to potentially trade up to draft Jerry Jeudy. Everyone knew it. It wasn't really that much of a secret. And ultimately what ends up happening, well, the Denver Broncos stand pat, and they're able to get their man without giving up any assets, and that makes Drew Lock a winner as well. Now we could truly explore how good Drew Lock is going to be in the future, and John Elway made a shrewd move in the NFL draft. Well, he just didn't mess it up, to be honest. Which brings me I guess you could kind of say this is a loser. I didn't know whether to say this is a loser or not, so I'm going to let my subscribers decide in the comment section down below. The Los Angeles Raiders drafting Henry Ruggs that early as the first wide receiver off of the NFL draft board, that's something that I personally didn't anticipate. I think that may have been poor value where they were at. They could have taken CeeDee Lamb or Jerry Jeudy. I thought they would have taken Jerry Jeudy because Jerry Jeudy is more like the receiver that Antonio Brown is, and that's who they lost, and that's who John Gruden wanted to build around. Furthermore, and I'm not going to say Henry Ruggs is going to be a bust or anything, but I'm very wary of wide receivers that come into the NFL draft, mainly being known for how fast they are. A couple years ago, the Cincinnati Bengals took a flyer on John Ross, and he broke the 40-yard dash record, and we saw how his career turned out. Now, I'm not saying Henry Ruggs is going to be the next version of that, but I am going to say that I don't think the Raiders had got the best value for their pick there. If you wanted Henry Ruggs, why not trade down? I guess you could make the argument that they were worried that the 49ers were going to take him, and ultimately the Niners did trade down as a result, but I still think that was poor value there. And Raiders fans are really not going to like me this draft, because here's the thing that I think is definitely a huge L. Them drafting Damon Arnett. Now, I didn't have Damon Arnett going in the first round at all, and the fact that the Raiders used a pick here just made me think that they looked at his tape and say, oh, look, this Damon Arnett guy is a pretty good cornerback. Well, here's who Damon Arnett is. He is the cornerback that lined up on the opposite side of Jeffrey Okudah. So there wasn't much of a challenge for Damon Arnett because Jeffrey Okudah always had the toughest assignment in Ohio State. Arnett did well, don't get me wrong. He had 22 completions on 58 targets. He had a 38% completion rate, and he's great in press coverage. And, you know, the problem with this is, of course, this is a huge reach. And the problem with this is the Las Vegas Raiders have been reaching for years. Last year, they reached on Clelin Ferrell, and they're just not getting good value for their picks. Now, again, Damon Arnett could be the next coming of Richard Sherman or Jalen Ramsey or Deion Sanders, for all you know. But no one had Damon Arnett going at this early in the draft. And honestly, the Raiders are reaching on most of these players with very, very high-end picks. I don't know, maybe they proved me wrong. Which brings me to my next winner, and this is a controversial one. Some people may agree with me, some people may not. Bear in mind, I'm a Dallas Cowboy fan, so you could say I'm biased, but I think the Dallas Cowboys got a huge W when they drafted CeeDee Lamb in the NFL draft. Now, here's the thing. I had CeeDee Lamb as my top wide receiver in this draft even before coming in, and I thought he was going to get taken like within the first 10 to 12 picks. But here's the thing, and I think this is why Jerry Jones pulled the trigger on this pick. Jerry Jones is haunted by passing on Randy Moss many years ago, and Randy Moss made him pay for it. But even furthermore, the Philadelphia Eagles were trying their best to trade up for CeeDee Lamb. So it's one of those situations where he's either on your team or you're playing against him. And CeeDee Lamb is a matchup nightmare. I know that the Cowboys have Amari Cooper, and this wasn't really that big of a need, but CeeDee Lamb will do phenomenal in the slot. And even furthermore, the Cowboys got potentially, in my opinion, the best wide receiver in the entire draft. Now, for the Eagles, they did want a wide receiver, and they ended up kind of reaching for one, so this kind of makes them a loser, and that's Jalen Reagor. Now look, Jalen Reagor is great. I had him going around this position, maybe like the 25 pick in my very first mock draft, and then recently I thought he was more of a second-round pick, and he's great. Don't get me wrong. I think he's going to be a great player. I feel like the Philadelphia Eagles did reach a little bit in order to get him, and he's not CeeDee Lamb, which is who they wanted. He has hands. He's okay at running routes. The issue with Reagor is he's pretty much Nelson Aguilar, who the Eagles were hoping to move on from. That's how I see Jalen Reagor. Our final loser of this video has to be Aaron Rodgers after the Green Bay Packers select Jordan Love. Look, whenever you get a new head coach and he selects a new quarterback, chances are you're going to be in trouble. And I find this to be very ironic because Aaron Rodgers is 36. Brett Favre was 35 when the Packers selected Aaron Rodgers, and he was notorious for not being willing to mentor Aaron Rodgers. And then after 2 years, the Packers said, we're going to move on to Aaron Rodgers. And pretty much the same thing is happening to Aaron Rodgers right now. So those are my biggest winners and losers, guys. If there's anyone I missed or you feel like anyone doesn't deserve to be on this list, let me know in the comment section down below. I'm your boy Mikerophone, and I'll catch you guys in our next upload.